I refuse to adopt the role of a victim in every circumstance. And that means that I try to take ownership for everything. That means I'm not blaming or putting my failure or my mistake on someone else. The worst thing that you could do to me in life is play the victim card, because then you've basically told yourself that you can't improve or change, or you couldn't have prevented or made better a certain situation. And I think it's a dead end road.
And as it's going on, one of the things that really, really hit me hard from that meeting was something that Simon Roosevelt said. He said in that meeting, disagreement is no excuse for disengagement. He said, although we're all sitting here and we agree to disagree here, we're not on the same page, because we don't agree, that does not mean that you then disengage from finding a solution or the issue itself and you become stagnant or propose to anything else because you're not getting what you want. And the
Hey!
It's about to get crazy. It's about to go down. It's about to get crazy. It's gonna be loud. This is our house. We do what we wanna. We'll blow the roof up. Everybody's coming. It's about to get crazy. It's about to go down. It's about to go down.
This is where I'm going to turn Jordan down.
Why would you do that?
I mean, it's just a gut instinct that it would be beneficial. Well, let's roll. You ready?
I'm ready.
Welcome to the Gritty Podcast.
Gritty.
I do like Batman.
I only say that.
I do feel like Batman sometimes.
Is it because you feel like Batman?
You.
Because you have those awesome homemade, weightlifting. What do you call them?
Okay, so
because I just learned this morning in the gym. That is why I start with the theme song Batman, I replace it with Gritty, which I thought.
So
was
I have some custom made.
Yes, custom made.
Okay, wrist wraps. They're wrist wraps that are Batman,
and they are cool.
Aren't
like
they?
I'm joking, but they're cool. Like he rolls up in the gym this morning, and I see him come over. He just finished doing some squats, and I go, "Where are you going?" And you're like, "Just a second." And he goes back, and you've got these. I thought they were pajama pants, but then you wrapped them around your hand, and you're like, "Dude, Batman."
Yeah,
because dude, you are Gotham's reckoning.
Yeah,
there's no question.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, I do want to stand for truth and light in a city of darkness.
Yeah.
But no, when you lift weights, especially, it depends. But if you're putting a heavy weight overhead or you're doing a heavy bench press, those things don't bother my wrists too much. But heavy thrusters can make my wrists sore. It's
You're
like
applying a lot of pressure at that point of contact.
Yeah. Mostly, though, it's when I get back into handstand push-ups after I've taken a break. Mm-hmm. Handstand push-ups hurt my wrists, and only initially. And so the first 2 or 3 weeks when I get back. So I've been gone, August, September, out hunting a lot.
How long have you been gone?
A lot. So I've been in the wilderness for a while.
Yeah.
And when you're out there, you're hiking, you're backpacking, you got the backpack, you're doing your thing. But the one thing you aren't doing is a lot of handstand push-ups.
No, you're not. In your case, you're riding a lot of saddles.
Yeah. Or push-ups in general. And so sometimes when I come back after a long hiatus, I need to wrap the wrists for a couple of weeks whenever I do handstand push-ups primarily. And then from there, it's weird though. I'll wrap them for probably 2 weeks of 2 or 3 sets per week. After a couple of weeks,
you don't need the custom Batman wraps.
I take the wraps off, and
you're all natural.
There's totally fine. And I think that's important for people as they're getting fit and they're getting back into things. A lot of times they'll be like, "Oh, my wrist hurts every time I do this," or "My knee hurts," or "My low back," and it's like, yes, that's normal. Scale it. Find a way to keep doing that exercise in a way that's safe and doesn't hurt, but where you can still do it, and slowly scale back to where you don't need the support. Like if you use a let's say a weight belt, for squats. Okay, if you feel like you need that, use it for a while, but as soon as you can, start weaning yourself off of it, maybe go in lighter weight and work your way up so that core is strong. Because I don't have a weight belt when I'm in the wilderness lifting a load.
No.
So
nope.
I'm a firm believer in scaling and in using techniques to get stronger. And so the wrist wraps are key for that. And then later when I start getting back into thrusters, especially heavy thrusters, which is just when the bar's in the rack position.
Yep.
And then
we're going overhead.
You're going overhead with the bar. You're pressing it at the top after you've done a squat. That thruster movement is really hard on the wrist too. And I know people who hurt ligaments and tendons in those wrists. And so
because they're weak.
Well, mobility is an issue, flexibility.
Yes. And proper posture.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And again, using the wrist wraps helps ensure I don't tear something or hurt something. And then as things get stronger and mobility increases, I loosen the dependence on the straps until I don't need them at all.
I found it interesting on that note. This year, especially, having actually been consistent with going to the gym and exercising regularly, and building a lot of core and functional strength that I honestly was lacking. And then going out hunting for a few weeks. And I tried to do like push-ups and sit-ups, when I was out, like if I was in camp or try to do something, but you're doing a lot of cardio, you're hiking, you're hunting, you're focused on that. And you're also not trying to, make your body any more painful than it already is. I come back from hunting after like a couple weeks, and it is amazing to me after being so consistent in the gym, exercising regularly, to come back and watch only 2 weeks. And in one case, I came back and it was only 1 week. How much weaker you feel, and to your point where you have to adjust and you're like, well, now wait a minute. I was able to execute this move with this much weight and now I'm having struggles doing it and it's only been a couple weeks. It's kind of interesting, like the foundation of muscle that's built and retained. And then when you're not consistently doing it all the time, and like you said, you're out there and you don't have a weight strap, you don't have any of these things. I found that firsthand when I came back and I started exercising again. It was like, man, I'm going to have to rebuild some of this. Wasn't like I was gone for months. It was only weeks. But the muscle memory is what I found fascinating, is how fast I was able to rebound back to like what we were doing this morning when I was doing those overhead thrusters, and being able to get back to adding the weight I was at before, because I got back on the horse and I started doing it again.
Absolutely.
I don't have the cool custom Batman. And if I had some, they'd probably be like Lord of the Rings, or something like that. But,
I'm telling you, like coming back from a long break and then hitting the gym, the first time you come back, from break, you hit the gym and you're disturbed. You're upset. You're like, what?
Yes.
My knee is feeling really wobbly in this squat. And I actually feel like I'm really struggling with rep 5, right?
When I used to be on
low weight.
Yeah.
Like, what is wrong? I just know that the first couple of weeks I get back, I'm going to feel weak. I'm going to be a little weak. But you know what? It only takes a couple of weeks and all of a sudden
you're back.
You're really back.
That's what I mean on the muscle memory side, is like your muscle has been, as it was formed and as you broke it down and then rebuilt it, it remembers that, right? And so when you go back to it, and
I think the key is, as I've gotten older, I'm smarter than I used to be.
Yeah, you're not doing what I did, which, let's talk about what wasn't smart. And you even called me out on it, was me going full send 2 days, doing all this exercise, staying regular on it. And then I did exercise. Like I was doing like a leg day. I was doing an arm day, like a day before the hunt. And I'm calling you out and I'm like, why aren't you at the gym? And you're like, 'cause I'm going hunting, bro. And I'm like, yeah, but don't skip leg day. And you're like, no. I'm not going to the gym because then I'm going to be on the mountain. My legs are going to hurt. My arms are going to hurt. And all of a sudden I went on this hunt and I was like, wow, I really regret my decisions for working out the week that I left.
And you can really injure yourself.
Yeah. And I did that. I made a simple mistake, and it wasn't even in the gym. It's right before I left for Oregon, and somebody had brought their bow in, and it was Jake's brother, and Jake brought his brother's bow in, and I had already done some arm exercises, and so then I'm pulling back this bow that has been cranked all the way up to like 75 or 80 pounds, hasn't had any of it, adjusted, and I didn't know that. But I was like, here, let me draw, what's the first thing you do when you got your friend's bow or anybody? You just grab it. You got to pull it back. I got to pull this back and see how it feels. So I pull it back. Well, as I'm pulling it back, I pulled something.
Yeah.
And then I'm just kicking myself.
But the thing is you wouldn't normally pull something except that you're doing 2-a-days and 3-a-days. And
that's what I mean.
Nights and not enough sleep, and you're hammering, in that gym. And then you go and you do something as simple as pull a bow back. But you're pushing yourself
to a limit that has consequences if you don't listen to your body like I wasn't listening.
Well, I think gains are made right in that space where you pushed yourself hard, but you haven't injured yourself, right? And so you kind of want to go to that point where you're pushing yourself, and things you're outside your
comfort,
what you're easily capable of, right? Yep. You go beyond that, but you don't go so far that you get hurt. Right. And so walking that line to me is like, that's athlete IQ. Mm-hmm. And it varies for each person how smart they are in that space. Right. Because you'll see people who are constantly injured. And you're like, well, what did you think was going to happen?
After you pushed yourself that far. And on the athlete IQ side, one thing that I've learned and I think is incredibly imperative to that note of, performance and when I was exercising regularly and doing like, lifting weights in the morning and then doing some cardio at night, or if I was doing lifting weights and intermittent cardio or pure cardio, whatever it was, I was doing a lot. And then I was working a lot at night too, a little bit. And you and I had a conversation about this, and I've always known this isn't rocket science, but man, those hours of sleep and the recovery is just as vital and just as important as the hard things you've done that day with exercise. And like you said, pushing yourself in that stimulus to a point to where you understand as an athlete IQ, as you call it, to understand the boundaries in which you're like, I have pushed my body to an uncomfortable place that is just outside my capabilities.
Yeah.
In that gains, spectrum that you're kind of illustrating for everyone, the thing that I think people miss the most and forego the most that I found with friends or associates is the actual sleep and recovery. Mm-hmm. And here you are, you come back from your hunt, and I'm asking you to come to the gym and you're like, dude, I'll get there, but I'm going to sleep. Like and I'm going to take 3 days and catch up on sleep, because when we're hunting, I was talking with some gentlemen that stopped by the office the other day, and I was telling them, because I was telling them about Mountain Up Slumber and, hey, you should try this product out. And they're like, what is it? I'm like, it's a deep sleep recovery product. It's optimal for nighttime recovery and all this great stuff. And they're like, okay, great. Yeah. Well, like, when do you take it? And I was like, well, you just take it every night, first off. But when you're hunting, I'm like, it's even more important, because all of us go out hunting, and what do we love to do when we come back to camp? Get around the campfire and tell everybody what happened to us that day. Or if we're at a lodge or wherever we are, we want to talk about the stories that happened that day. And that goes long into the night. But what do we have to do the next day? Wake up super early, which then means I've now sacrificed, and I'm only getting maybe 4 to 5 hours of sleep instead of a full 8. So you can really start to see, as the hunt progresses, how your inability, even though your physical condition could be really strong, you could be really good, you're starting to, chip away at your ability to perform better on the hunt, or, whatever you're tackling. Because you're sacrificing the simple, your sleep.
There's 3 pillars, sort of to the fitness, the exercise, which we all geek out on and seem to be for the most part, we're like, yeah, did you see my PR today? Or did you see everything, how much weight I can lift, or how much I did on the assault bike, whatever it is. Exercise seems to be the obvious and the thing that we seem to just hammer hard on and hit hard. But the other 2 things are nutrition and sleep. And people are more aware of nutrition than ever before. I think they work on it. But most of the people I know, especially in the culture that we're in today, they ignore the sleep. the importance of that. And I think that's where their gains suffer. So if I have that rule, I'm like, okay, if I don't get the proper sleep, then I don't get to do the exercise. I don't get to hammer my body if I don't take care of the sleep. It's that makes it so that when there's some peer pressure to stay up late, I'm like, well, then I won't give myself permission to exercise. And I want to go work out, so I got to go to bed, And so that's how it works psychologically for me. People who hunt with me or go to the trade shows or anything with me, I can pull the all-nighter and I can stay up late.
I've seen you do that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm right there with you.
But
you seem to tap out before I do.
I am to the point in life in general where there were a couple times in camp, everybody's having a few drinks around the campfire in British Columbia. It's beautiful. There's clear sky. You can see the northern lights, and we're all hanging out and stuff. Everybody's laughing and telling stories, and I'm looking at the clock, and I'm like, it's my bedtime. And I'm like, good night, everybody. And they all stay up another 3 hours while I'm snoring. And I wake up chipper and excited about the day. And there are others in camp who woke up not chipper and not excited and not joyful. And so, I'm more interested in my mornings now than I am my evenings.
Than your evenings. This is going to be an interesting segue. Okay. So this kind of actually segues into our discussion today a little bit, but it relates completely to what we're discussing now. Okay. There is an individual that everybody loves. Books you've read about him. People adore him. Everybody, even now, there's shirts printed about him that says, what would Theodore Roosevelt do? Everybody loves Theodore Roosevelt, right? What I've found interesting, and this is something that I learned recently from actually rereading the book, Ego is the Enemy, where Ryan Holiday talks about, the perceptions of ego and how people will allow that to consume them. It also talks about how certain individuals in life had a certain mindset or ability to, when obstacles, it wasn't Ego is the Enemy. Obstacle is the Way. I was reading Obstacle is the Way. This is an Obstacle is the Way. Excuse me. Both great books, but this is coming from Obstacle is the Way, from the same author. He talks about an obstacle that was placed in the way of Theodore Roosevelt. And when I heard it, I loved it because it actually correlates to not only what we're discussing, what we're going to discuss, but to mountain ops. Everybody loves Theodore Roosevelt. And there's a lot of people out there, and you and I know some people who have some podcasts or things that say things about mountain ops, and they're like, you don't need supplements, you don't need exercise, fitness, these things that we're talking about. But did you know that Theodore Roosevelt was a huge advocate for exercise and fitness and working out? And he had to do it out of necessity because he had an asthma issue growing up, and when he was young, that his dad was like, to correct this problem, son, you're just going to work out and you're going to exercise and you're going to beat it. And while that followed him much of his life, he was somebody who not only was a big, founding father, if you will, for conservation, but he also loved and appreciated fitness. And it was also something that he used in his life to help try to right size a condition that he was suffering from with his asthma. And so when I heard that, I was like, man, that's awesome. The guy that I love and the guy that I respect for everything that he's done to set in motion 100 years of preservation for land, waters, and wildlife is also somebody who today, if I shook his hand, I feel like he would say, thank you, Mountain Ops, for what you're doing to inspire people to get outdoors, to be healthy when they're doing it, because it's something that he believed in too. Oh, yeah.
What's funny, too, is so Theodore Roosevelt coined that the strenuous life.
Yes, the strenuous life.
And so he was a huge proponent of the strenuous life. And there was some literature out about that at his time, which he had read, and part of even his religious background, they believed in this strenuous life. The strenuous Christian, like the person who goes out and actually pushes their body, like endures the cold, climbs the mountains, suffers the outdoors, right? And
because he gave that speech, the strenuous life speech, in Chicago. That this is what you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, and he was a proponent of that his whole life, long before he gave the speech. But yeah, he suffered from asthma to such an extent that they thought he would die as a young boy, and that he wasn't getting any stronger or healthier doing all the things that science typically at that time prescribed. And the very thing is, his father came to him and basically said, "Look, son, you've got will and character. You've got strength of spirit and mental capacity. That's a gift inside a crappy body."
Yep.
And the only way you're going to become great is to build your body. You're going to have to just build it, make it better. So that's when he started doing push-ups and started doing pull-ups and and pretty soon he's a boxer in college.
Yes.
Right? Pretty soon he's climbing mountains and he's leaving people that have much better genetics.
And better lung capacity than he did, because that was something that he was suffering from. And here's a gentleman who embraced.
What's fascinating is that someone can take, because you hear today, like, well, I've got this knee problem, or I've got this health problem, or I've got asthma, I can't do it, right? And I'm not minimizing those conditions. They are drawbacks and they suck. But I truly believe in the strenuous life philosophy myself, that it's through rehabilitation, it's through physical therapy, it's through exercise and the strenuous life that the body can overcome these things. And the answer is not my back is jacked up, so therefore now I can't do anything. The answer is go and find a way to strengthen your back and get past it. And, I get countless emails from people who have reversed this life path they're on, where maybe it was their gut health, maybe they had some issues with severe knee issues or whatever, and they decide to make it a goal to overcome those weaknesses, and they become fully functional and strong adults and strong humans. And I come from that perspective where I herniated a disc in my low back. I was in my mid-30s. And it got to a point where I couldn't get out of bed. And then it took me a couple of years where I couldn't really do any activities. I couldn't lift things. My back would lock up on me and I'd get stuck places. And
when they talk about the backbone, like, it is literally the backbone. When that goes out, any part of it, it's amazing how much you're incapacitated, the inability to be able to do simple functions and things that you're like, this was cake.
And I've seen people in that situation, friends of mine, in fact, that pretty much more or less gave up. Right. We're like, okay, from now on, I'm going to take these meds for pain. I'm not going to do physical activity. I'm disabled. I'm on this insurance and I get, disability check. And I'm like, for me, I just found a way.
Yep.
I went and I read and I studied, and I remember when I first got to where I could pretty much be somewhat normal as long as I didn't do anything weird with my back. And I was like, man, I longed for the day I could do a sit-up without my back locking up.
Right.
It sounds insane, And I would go to the pool and do like leg raises and stuff in a pool. And then I come home and I got to a point where I could do some sit-ups a little bit here and there. And fast forward to age 44, and I can deadlift 400 pounds and I can clean and jerk over 345. A few years ago, I did 345. And I worked my way up to that very slowly. Mm-hmm. My point is incrementally, but over a long period of time. But It's amazing how strong the human body is. And the one thing that I feel like I made a mistake on back all those years was a lot of years sitting at a desk and then playing basketball without any strength and conditioning to support those activities.
Interestingly enough, in Ryan Holiday's book, he mentions two things that you actually just brought up that I think is incredibly, I would say very parallel to what you're describing as, and you even mentioned a little bit, you're like, hey, this was the way that I found. And he talks about obstacles the way, as we're talking about Theodore Roosevelt and the strenuous life and what he was faced with, which was a weak body with conditions that would inhibit him from a lot of physical activity or being able to do a lot of things, where his father was like, son, like you said, over here, you've got all these great qualities, but let's just be honest. This is your obstacle and this is the way. So you need to figure it out, right? And he says, there is no good or bad without us. There is only perception. There is the event itself and the story we will tell ourselves about what it means. He then goes on to say, we forget in life, it doesn't matter what happens to you or where you come from. It matters what you do with what happens and what you've been given. And so oftentimes you were respectful in saying, I know that there are people out there, and we're not just talking about physical fitness. This is anything in life. An obstacle is something that can be placed in your path. And most of the times, whether it's a physical or a mental, some of the times when Ryan talks about it from great people like Theodore Roosevelt and other great people in a part of history, the obstacle is simply just in your path. It comes up to you to what you want to do now with that obstacle. You want to allow that obstacle to inhibit your progression, and because it's directly in your path. So you say, okay, I've got a back problem and I'm just going to, this means that I can't do X, Y, Z, right? Mm-hmm. Or you can do what Ryan says, which is flip that obstacle upside down and just absolutely crush it and make yourself a new way by going around it or blasting through it with a mental fortitude and mindset that you had to say, compoundingly, I am going to do things to help improve this. My wife, Jordan, did the same thing. She got in a car accident, had terrible, still does today, have terrible back issues. Doctor told her by the time you're 30, you're going to have like arthritis, you're having deteriorating cartilage, like all these negative things, right? So Jordan took the same mindset you did in saying, now all these obstacles have been placed in my path or put in my way, that I am going to have a lower quality of life. So what did she do? She went and started doing yoga. She started stretching out. She started going and doing strength building. And to your point on what you just described, what you did is also what she did, which was incrementally, she started very small, just started doing exercises and stretches, and then she started adding weights, and then she started doing a barbell, and she started doing weightlifting. And over time, that compounding effect, she has now strengthened her lower back, which is where the isolated issue was, to a point where she still has the pain. It's mitigated a lot. It's not as much. She has more mobility, more, less pressure. And now, she's like, I understand that I'm still going to have pain the rest of my life, but instead of letting that pain control me and tell me what I can and can't do, I'm going to decide what I want to do. And so that's what I really appreciated about the perspective of Theodore Roosevelt. And even what you just brought up is the very fact that in his strenuous life, and when he gave that speech, and if anybody has an opportunity to read it, it's awesome. Mm-hmm. He and you and many others and any of us that's listening to this podcast, you have the opportunity to not be a circumstances of your, what's that quote that you actually said on our video? That was so brilliant. You are not a product of your circumstances. You are a product of your decisions, which is really what, I think both you and I believe very strongly. And I'm a huge advocate for that. Anything that is in your way is only there sometimes because of unfortunate, but also because of maybe perception and what you place and do with it. Absolutely. I just did a podcast about Viktor Frankl. Okay. In Man's Search for Meaning. And in the book, he talks about conservation, life in life in a concentration camp. Yes. And how when you strip humanity, a human being, of everything and push them to the brink of death, and you herd them and kick them and push them like cattle, and you treat them less than vermin, right? That the human psyche and the human being can and often does turn into a mere animal. Okay. That cares about two things. Where can they get more food? And surviving. And how can they avoid the SS? Mm. How can they avoid the prison guards? Okay. Right? Because they're the ones that inflict the pain
and that do the horrible things. So it's like a sheep around the wolves, right? Like that are just haggard and surrounded. And it's like, okay, a dumb animal cares about two things. Where can I get more food? And how can I not get eaten? It's like, and he's like, in those circumstances, when a person becomes like that, they don't really care about morality or right or wrong or maintaining some human dignity, or basically they're doing anything that it takes, whatever it takes to survive.
Yep.
And he said, but there were those examples. There were those human beings that were in these concentration camps, albeit very few, but they were there. Those that held on to their dignity and that would not give up their moral moorings, and that would, despite torture and the most heinous treatment, would not turn on another person, or would not give in to, would not do something horrible just to save themselves. And that bespoke a heroism of humanity and of an individual, and proved to him that we're not a product of our circumstances. That at the end of the day, at the last, each human being has the ability to choose.
Yep, you're a product of your decisions.
Their attitude, who they will be.
Yep.
Regardless of what external forces are placed upon you. That your will is that one thing that no one can take from you, no matter how hard they try, even to your death. And so I remember reading that book at a young and impressionable age. I think I was 18, and I truly believe that every human being has the ability to choose who and what they will be, and that you're not a product of your circumstances.
Marcus Aurelius said, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been.
What's interesting about that is, in today's world of the social media and the public beating that you can take, right?
Public beating, the social media beating.
People can criticize something you've done. Let's say you shoot a deer and then you don't gut it that day, and you gut it in the morning instead, and it froze overnight. There's a lot of people who can hate you and can bash you publicly because you didn't gut it the day before. As an example, right? And in the world of that, you can take offense. You can be offended. You can be angry. You can be, or you, like Marcus Aurelius said, you can just roll on.
Just roll on. Because whatever you think that you are, like if you feel the feelings of offense,
if you take on the role of a victim, that's the one thing that I refuse to do. I refuse to adopt the role of a victim in every circumstance. And that means that I try to take ownership for everything too. That means I'm not blaming or putting my failure or my mistake on someone else. Right?
Yep.
That way, the worst thing that you could do to me in life is play the victim card, because then you've basically told yourself that you can't improve or change, or you couldn't have prevented or made better a certain situation.
Yep.
And I think it's a dead end road.
Yep.
When you read Extreme Ownership.
Oh yeah.
The thing
Jocko talks about that.
What surprises me at the end of the day as you read the book, it's like, okay, this happened and this happened and this sucked and this put you in this position and this put you in, and these 10 people didn't do what they were supposed to as you were guiding them, and blah, blah, and your marriage fell apart and your spouse cheated on you and your spouse did this and your spouse, and guess what? It's still all your fault.
Yep.
The whole book is like, it's still your fault.
Everybody goes, well, and it's easy to put blame on others, and it's easy to deflect or defer and say the reason why my life sucks and the reason why I'm in my situation is because of others. And that is completely perception based, which is like when you as a person, like you said, play the victim card, you are giving up so much in that moment. You don't even realize that you are literally foregoing progress, an opportunity.
I found myself, as Jocko was talking about this, going, How's it my fault?
Yeah. Oh, dude.
The woman did this and this and this and this and cheated. It's still my fault. And it's like, well, perhaps. And he goes through these examples.
He goes examples, yeah.
Well, you could have 3 years ago had a conversation. You could have gone counseling in this situation. You could have, and at the end of the day, he's not saying that that things don't suck, but he's saying if you own all of it, at the end of the day, then you start taking control of your entire life.
Exactly.
You never sit back and go, well, this part I couldn't have changed or I can't make better.
Yep.
You're just like, no, the whole thing at the end of the day, the whole thing is me.
When we read that book and then we did that podcast, which is any of you guys want to go listen to that podcast, we did that with Corey Jacobson. That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. It's one of the highest downloaded episodes of the Gritty podcast.
It was Jocko put together a great
It's an easy
book.
read.
Oh, and
but
if you do the Audible, I mean, if you guys listen to his podcast anyways, you know he's got this like commanding voice. Yeah. And then his counterpart, it escapes my mind. What was his friend that helped him with it?
Leif Babin.
Both of them have these like compelling voices. Like, this is extreme ownership.
Right.
We were in Benghazi, or we were in Baghdad, and they're talking about like, and it's actually something for me. And we talk lightly of it, but you explain it so well, Brian. The very fact that as you're reading the book, just like we've read Extreme Ownership or Obstacles Away, or these books that are trying to self-develop you and help you take some ownership of things maybe you're not doing good in your life or things that you need to right size and do better or whatever it is. That book's helped my marriage a ton.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to just blame her for so many things when you're like, hold on a minute. I obviously didn't do a good job communicating to you how important it was that we do this for our child or we do this for our relationship, because I just assume that you're going to know. And communication, as Jocko talks about, is key to winning wars, winning battles, and being able to move forward in a battlefront is communication. Because if you're not on the same page, if you're not communicating, then all of a sudden it's easy. What creeps into that is, doubt.
Well, and that's where, to interrupt, I mean, that's where ego is the enemy comes into play, and it's a major part of extreme ownership. And one of the parts that stood out to me in that book, going on this tangent, is in that book he's sitting there talking about the SEAL teams and their training, and they're going through these training exercises, and they have a SEAL team leader who. And I don't know if this was in a pre-SEAL teams or this is after they were teams. I can't recall. But basically, though, it's someone who was in charge of a team, and they lost every time in like the rowing races. They sucked.
They had. I remember they had the best players physically.
No. At first, they were just losing, and then the next team won every single round. So let's say there's 5 teams, right? One was always the loser and one was always the winner. And the leader of the losing team was like, look, it's my team. Like, if I had a real team, I wouldn't lose. And they took that guy and put him in charge of the winning team. And they took the winning team captain and put him in charge of the losing team. And lo and behold, the losing team is now second place or first place consistently.
Yeah, it totally flops.
Totally. But the winning team doesn't actually lose too much either. That was one thing that they noticed as well. And it was an eye opener for the guy that was the captain that kept blaming the team for everything. It was always someone else's. It was always this guy didn't row hard enough. This guy didn't.
You were out of sync. You should have done a better job. Why didn't you prepare more?
Right. And you take that same group of people who can't win and you put a leader there.
Yep.
And now they're
who's taking extreme ownership for anything that happens in that competitive environment.
I mean, they're all elite, right? So, and so at the end of the day, that's an eye opener. And the reason, one of the things that stood out to me was the guy's ego, the losing guy's ego, couldn't be taught. He wouldn't see that he had any issues or that he
wasn't his fault.
And he didn't own anything. He was a victim. And so when he saw that the other captain could take his same team and make it a winning team, it was the first time that he realized he had a lot of improvement to do on himself, that it was a humbling moment for him. And
because it was the easiest escape to that situation for him was to say the reason why we aren't winning and the reason why we can't succeed is because of you guys. Mm-hmm. You guys
it's a cop out.
Yeah, it's an absolute cop out.
It's an easy way out, though.
It's
that the ego blanket, right? The pride blanket.
The pride blanket.
You wrap yourself up in the pride blanket, and you can say, "Yeah, I'm perfect. I'm really awesome, and everything." All my failures in life are due to other things, and then you can't grow because the pride blanket's keeping you cozy.
Oh, it's so comfortable. It's like
go out and
it's your pride. We'd call it a pride whoopee.
Yeah,
like your little pride whoopee.
So I think as we and you and I want to sit down and talk about actually conservation, because you have been more involved in it than ever before. And one of the things that I talking about the strenuous life. You look at Randy Newberg and me. We had a conversation a while back where he said, "Hey, you know what? Conservation isn't easy. It's uncomfortable. Conservation is uncomfortable." Anytime I talk about public land, or I talk about maybe hunting of grizzly bears or something, I'm going to run up against opposition at every turn.
Yep.
At every turn. And Randy and I, sometimes we commiserate a little bit on a podcast because we're a little burned out from the beating we've taken from the opposition when we bring up a stance on an issue that we believe in. And it would be so much easier just not to bring it up at all.
Mm-hmm.
It would be. It'd just be like, let's just talk about hunting and kumbaya. And
what do they always
stuff.
say? It's the two things you never talk about, never bring up.
Like
politics and religion.
Right.
Don't talk about it. Just leave that out. It's so, because then I can still like you.
Right.
I don't have to make a decision now anymore because you have taken a stance on something that I may not either one, fully understand, or what I do understand, I may not agree with. And so I can't support you.
And conservation falls in that category. It's uncomfortable. It's messy, and it's always political.
Yep.
Right.
This is something that I was just told recently, as we'll go into more of my experience. Mm-hmm. But whether you like it or not, politics makes decisions on habitat, wildlife, waters, and land. Doesn't matter what you think of it and how, your dollars or what tag you buy or whatever. You know who controls those dollars, and do you know who makes decisions on those dollars, or who takes the dollars of all of our tax paying money and anything that the government has? Politics. There's no way to get around it. Yep. You have to go through Washington. You can't skirt around the edges, and you have to literally go right into Washington.
You can't sit there and just say, this is how we should all do it.
This is how it should be, and I don't agree, and so because I don't, we're not going to do it, or I'm going to die before they take my public lands. It's like, listen, and I'll get into some of the things.
Because there's a couple things you did. You've been to, first of all, you went and had a meeting with Senator Mike Lee.
We had, so Lan, Tani, and I went and met with Senator Mike Lee's, what do you call it? His team here in Utah, and to talk about land transfer in Utah.
Yep. And then you also went to the Washington D.C.
Yep. I was invited and felt extremely honored to be invited by Garrett Long from the Wild Sheep Foundation to come have a seat around the table of what Zinke is calling his round table, for his conservation round table, which he has now established as a summit to bring together, along with his co-chair, Simon Roosevelt, who is actually a descendant of Theodore, I was able to meet. Great guy, by the way. And some of the departments or bureaus of like land management, natural resources, wildlife, all these things. And then you have on one side of the table, you've got all these conservation groups that we all know. So Zinke puts together this summit.
So you said You're sitting on one side.
So you've got this table, and it's actually not round. So I was really disappointed because as we got there, I was like, I'm expecting like Excalibur, like we're going to be sitting down with King Arthur and discussing like knighthood and all things like glory.
Because you're a nerd like that.
Yeah, because I'm thinking it's like, this is Lord of the Rings. Like we're going to the Fellowship of the Ring. This is the Fellowship of Conservation. Like I can't wait to see Frodo and Samwise and, everybody else. And we're on one side of the table, you have all these different conservation organizations that are anything from Ducks Unlimited to the Wild Sheep Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. You've got Mule Deer Foundation. You've got the Turkey Federation. I mean, you've got all these different organizations that specialize on species or habitats that pertain to those species on this side of the table. Mm-hmm. Then in the middle, you have people from Defenders of Wildlife, National Geographic. You've got all these people that are non-endemic to this group of organizations over here that are interested in some of the same things, but maybe in a different way. Maybe a heavy emphasis on environment, and where some are on animals, but maybe like no killing of animals, period. Right. And then the last part of the table is made up with Zinke. You had Brian Steed, he's not labeled the director, but he's the highest in Bureau of Land Management. So the director of Bureau of Land Management's there. Casey, who's also from the Department of Interior, who I forget his last name, but Casey is in charge of a lot of the like data analysis that he's receiving and then he's putting into action across the nation. And then you've got the co-chair there, who is Simon Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. And so I'm from the meeting here in Salt Lake City with the staff of Senator Mike Lee to then going to Washington, D.C., which is the epicenter of, like we said, where everything gets done or doesn't. There's no way around it. You have to go through the District of Columbia. Mm-hmm. And to be invited and be able to see and kind of spectate, but then also the purpose in why we were invited to this summit, as well as the meetings to follow, was to help with being a voice and a different voice for conservation in support of, the agenda that we were there for was to support Wild Sheep Foundation's missions, which was to put more wild sheep on the mountain, and to be able to see the political process and to be able to go to different. So we went from the Conservation Roundtable to where in Zinke outlined and went over a lot of what has happened in the last year since he established the roundtable. So the whole purpose of attending this was to, one, be informed and updated on a lot of the conservation efforts that are being done at the highest level. So, I mean, we went over things like corridors, wintering grounds, things that are things that are being done on that note that pertain to, which I found fascinating. I did not know this. With those areas that these big game animals, and the primary three that they're focusing on to help prove the model is elk, mule deer, and pronghorn. So they're focusing on those three big games in the western states that pertain to creating under and overpasses over big highways that have now been built and put in place that have disrupted these animals' migration routes, these wintering grounds that they go to. And so now they're like, if they're redirected, it can extremely affect the herd because they are comfortable knowing where they're going to get their food. And then that's all of a sudden they can't cross this road. So they've established one in Oregon. They have two more projects going on here in Utah and another one that's being put in Nevada. And the only reason why this has come to be, believe it or not, as Zinke went over and explained it, was because in Oregon, there was a situation where an animal died because it was trying to cross the road. And so there was enough support that was given to say, all right, let's create a underpass and an overpass that goes over these main highways that allows wildlife to travel between. Well, fortunately, that's...
Can you hunt that pitch point?
Yeah, right? Can you set up a tree stand, or is it cool if I put my trail camera here? I just want to know what's passing through. I'll give all the pictures to the government because they won't do anything with it, but I'm not going to get to my hunter buddies. So then we went over, there were so many things that I just don't know, and I'm not going to get into detail, that people just don't understand how much is being done and how much is going on.
I had no idea. I mean, I did know that the Mule Deer Foundation did some tracking and that they had established through some studies that, and maybe it wasn't just the Mule Deer Foundation, but that mule deer migrate like 3 or 4 states, and that these migration patterns have been completely devastated because of highway systems and neighborhoods, residents.
In fact,
and that it's a very perilous and dangerous journey for them to travel from their breeding and grounds down to their like wintering grounds, and that there are some mule deer, for example, that just stay local and never travel, but there's those that just for whatever in their DNA they do travel, and it's like a very important part of their future to be able to migrate.
It's actually the state of Utah, in concert with working with the Mule Deer Foundation, was able to do a study that helped them to understand better the migration of mule deer, right? They actually have this project you can go right now and follow along with, where they put a tracking device on the same doe deer that's traveling in between its wintering areas and migrating, where you can track her path. And they tracked her last year, and they're tracking her again to see, to your point, where she's going and what she's having to cross to get there. And so in Utah, they've started to establish these under and overpasses, and tracking the deer to see how it's affecting, to help them with where they've been redirected because of where roads and
the question
stuff is gone.
Is how can they teach the animals the redirect? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, is it working? Like, you build it doesn't mean they'll use it.
That's the thing that they're doing right now. So it's something that has just been started, and the data is not comprehensive enough. And that is why they're only focusing on these 3 major big game species, to see if this project, which is starting very small, is actually on a very small scale, then going to be able to put into a big scale, to be able to say, hey, this is, and that's the thing, is it's like you follow the data. What the data tells you is going to tell you if it's working or it's not. So right now they've begun the process. And this is what's fascinating about my time spent in Washington, D.C., is it's a political process. Things that are being started now will not see their full time or be able to be completely accomplished till like 5 years from now. And in some cases, 8 years. There's a process that has to begin, and you're dealing with, and this is what I found very fascinating, you're sitting at the table with our guys, people in our corner. You're sitting with the Department of Interior, and then you're also sitting at the table with everyone who's not really on the same page as us, but cares about certain things. We may have certain things we agree on that we don't. But
like, for example, there are those that care a lot about grizzly bears that don't want to see them ever hunted.
Yes.
And then there are those that care a lot about grizzly bears that believes that they should be hunted.
Yes.
We have the same goal where we care about grizzly bears, but we completely disagree on what caring for them looks like.
Absolutely. And some of the comments that were brought up in that meeting were from like the defenders of wildlife. They kept, they couldn't wrap their minds around, why are we not focusing on all the animals? What about the birds and the bees and the squirrels and all those things, and it was interesting to see the process of, they're like, listen, we care about all the animals. I mean, this is the Department of Interior. Like, Zinke's like, we care about all the animals. But in order for us to prove that this actually works, we have to focus on the largest groups of wildlife and big game that proves this theory that we could roll out in a larger way, right? But then they're like, okay, but then you're focusing on conservation efforts that surround these 3 animals and not these other ones. And it was just interesting to see, because you're like, listen, they're sitting there and they're continuing answering these questions that are coming from the other side of the table, where this side of the table is asking questions on, a lot of the questions that are being asked are about grazing. Okay, let's talk about grazing and grazing allotments and things that are being done there. Like, also let's discuss public lands. You have the the Bureau of Land Management there, right? They're managing the millions of acres that are still accessible or still viable for us to access and use. And so I'm sitting there, Brian, and I'm hearing things from all sides, and I'm just soaking it all up. And I'm also watching this process unfold. And as it's going on, one of the things that really, really hit me hard from that meeting was something that Simon Roosevelt said. He said in that meeting, disagreement is no excuse for disengagement. He said, although we're all sitting here and we agree to disagree here, we're not on the same page, because we don't agree, that does not mean that you then disengage from finding a solution or the issue itself and you become stagnant or propose to anything else because you're not getting what you want. And the one thing that I've begun to learn as I've started to immerse myself more in some of the political side of conservation, and it's something that at Mountain Ops we've started to take a serious finite look at, because you and I have talked about this on another podcast when we had Jared here, Frazier. As a corporation or as a company, we want to understand the issues. We want to understand what we can do about them. We understand how we can help. We don't simply just want to write a check and say, hey guys, we do conservation because we write checks to these organizations. As we're having meetings with each of our partners that are part of Operation Conservation, and the reason why I was even brought to Washington, D.C. was to help be a voice for their initiatives and their projects and their goals that align with ours and with all sportsmen. So as we went from the next meetings, we went from that to meeting with the director, Brian Steed of the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, talking about issues regarding public lands, grazing allotments, things like that, that are, without getting into too much detail, is infringing upon or affecting domestic sheep and wild sheep in the same range. Because you're dealing with grazers or cattlemen or different things like that. There's so many different, I'm like sitting here going, guys, it's not as simple and it's not as easy as you think. It's a lot easier to say, hey, keep it public and don't sell any of it. It's very easy to say that. And I love that rhetoric too, because it's God bless America and, I want to keep what I can keep. The truth in reality is that's a fantasy world. It's not fantasy in the fact that we can't keep public lands. It's fantasy to think that we are not like that not one single acre will be sold or will be inaccessible. Because reality is, and what I'm finding, but what we have to do, especially with my time, and it was only, Brian, I was only there for one day, but you get to see the process. And I got to meet with some of the highest people in natural resources talking about federal lands. And so you're talking about public land, you're talking about private land, multi-use, all these different things that affect the great spectrum of the United States of America. And what I've learned is we are up against a lot of opposition. There's a lot of opposition against us in the fact that when we're talking about not only wildlife and wild places, both lands and waters, we have a lot to do as sportsmen, as anglers, as hunters, to fight to protect and reserve and keep and preserve as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, what I'm seeing is there is a lot of people that you brought up, the way that they view the preservation of these animals is very different than the way we do. And so coming to a common understanding and understanding that in the political process, unfortunately, there is always a win-win. Mm-hmm. But what comes with that is losses. And you have to negotiate to find where we can find commonalities and a common ground in which we can both agree, hey, this is so like in my discussions with Senator Mike Lee, even with Lantani, we're sitting there saying, hey, we want you to know our stance. Our stance is keep it public and we want access for all. And we want to keep all the land as much as possible. But even Land said, he's like, but I understand that we are going to have to come to an agreement, right? Because that's the only way things get done. It doesn't just stop. The political process moves forward, whether you like it or not. But you have to find where can we win and how much can we win so that we can preserve as much as possible. So there's a momentum of something that's spiraling. And the goal becomes how much can we pump the brakes? How much can we keep? How much can we stop that momentum? And what I'm very happy to see I would not say that I am versed completely in all things conservation. I'm learning so much because I'm excited about it, and I'm realizing as a company and a corporation, I've told you this before, and I said it in the last podcast. I'm starting to truly feel that the severity of a strenuous life that Theodore Roosevelt talks about in that speech that he gave in Chicago, which is that it's hard. Politics are hard. Getting involved in politics is hard because of what you said earlier, which is that most people are not going to agree. We're not all going to agree.
And I want to say this: it's not just politics.
No, it's the whole gamut.
It's any principle that you live by and want to stand for.
Yep.
If you are a principled human being and you want to stand for things that you believe in, life is going to be rough.
Yep.
Right? You're and also rewarding. But if you stand up for things that are unpopular because you feel they're right, if you stand up for individuals that you believe in, even though they're universally not liked.
Yeah, unaccepted by popular.
Yes. If you, if you do things that are somewhat countercultural because you believe in what it is, you're going to run up against opposition. And it's so much easier just to sort of avoid conflict and just sort of coast along. But I also feel like you got one shot at this life.
Yep.
Right? And why not go down swinging? Why not live it and stand for what you believe and let the chips fall where they may?
Yep.
And, I rub people the wrong way sometimes, because of my opinion. They write in, they're disappointed in me. They wish I had a different stance, and I get that. I hope, again, we can agree to disagree on some things and then still align on things where we do agree. That just because we don't agree doesn't mean we take our ball and go home.
Yep.
We don't disengage. We still stay engaged. We just agree that. But the thing that does concern me at times is how two groups can have the same goal, same concern for wildlife, for example, but have totally different ideas on how to get there. And you see it in government, right? Like, I'm a staunch believer in capitalism. I'm not a fan of socialism. At the end of the day, I think a lot of those people that are socialistic in nature, that believe in that, we have the same goal. We want America to be wealthy. We want people to be well off. We want people to be healthy and strong. We want our country to thrive, right? But their idea of how to get there is through a socialistic government, and mine is through a capitalist. And I am disturbed, though, because in my opinion, often the method by which we achieve that goal is going to determine whether you get there or not.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, I listened to Dave Ramsey about getting out of debt, and he tells this story where he's in the grocery store. He's in the grocery store, and he's got 3 daughters, or 2 daughters or something, and then he's got a little boy. They're going through the grocery store, and in the Ramsey house, you don't throw a fit, right? And they're in the grocery store, and the little boy wants a candy bar. And his dad's like, no, you're not getting a candy bar. We're not buying that. Sorry. The answer is no. And his son falls on the floor and kicks and screams and starts carrying on and yelling and screaming, right? It's a parenting moment. What do you do? And the daughters are like, they're older. They're like trying to warn the son, please don't do this to your father. There will be punishment, and the little boy is just carrying on because he wants his way. And his dad hauls him outside and paddles his butt, right? Spanks him and is like, no, we don't act that way in the store. And he turns to the audience and he goes, now I know there's a lot of you in this audience who don't agree with spanking a kid when you're raising him, but I just want to say you're what's wrong with America. And to me, that's how I was raised too. My parents, I acted like that. I got a good whooping, and I feel like, other parents I observed When their kid did that, they were like, okay, we'll buy you the candy bar.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to raise a healthy, strong child. It's independent, that grows up. Like, that's the goal, right? Parents all want this. But look at the two different methods of getting there. One believes that, well, if I just give them the candy bar and I'm nice and I tell them, someday, okay, well, let's compromise. I'll buy you this candy bar today, but next time you need to be okay with not getting one, blah, 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 right? And then you have the parent who's like, nope, you act this way, there's going to be a punishment. There's a way that we act, and we're respectful to our parents, and no means no. And they raise these kids, and inevitably, the outcome, in my opinion, the method by which you get there is everything. The outcome for that kid who just gets spoiled and gets the candy bar is going to be completely different than the kid you end up with at the end. People can have the same agendas. They can have the same goals. But if they can't agree with me in certain ways on how to get there, I don't know how we can reconcile, Jordan, because I will never give that kid a candy bar for throwing a fit on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I won't because I know where that will go. And so when it comes to conservation, I want to compromise, yes, but in certain ways, there are things I know where that will go. I'm not okay with
that.
it.
That's one thing that I've learned is that and this goes back to the complete gamut and really when you look at it as a whole, when you get to see the political process firsthand, you see the babies crying and kicking and screaming on this side because they're like, he's not there. Because they're like, this is what I want, and this. And then you have those that are willing to stand for something and stick to their guns and as they say, burn the ships. Like we're gonna burn the ships and we're gonna blow the bridges. We are not leaving this, and that is a tactic that does work. It's not that it doesn't, and it's not that it doesn't work today. It's understanding the battlefield, the scope in which you are faced with, what your obstacles are, who your opponent is, what we have and what we want, and then understanding the strategy behind the best way to be able to approach those situations and know when to pick your battles. Because at the end of the day, there's a war that's raging against conservation. Has been since the start. I mean, there's been a lot done to preserve a lot of it, but at the end of the day, it continues to be attacked on all fronts from parties, both domestic and abroad. And we have to know and understand the best course of action and when to take those significantly strong, stances that we're like, we are not going to budge on this. So we're going to have to almost riot, if you will, to be able to make sure that we preserve what we want. But then there's also situations where you're going to have to be negotiable. You're going to have to be able to be bipartisan and look at opportunities and say, we can forgo this at the most minimal amount. Like when we were talking with Senator Mike Lee, we're sitting there and we're saying, listen, we do not want to discuss land transfer. Like it is not a good idea.
Land transfer.
Land transfer. Yeah. Land transfer because of historically all these reasons. We have data. We have history that shows us what's going to happen. And no matter how you draft it up and no matter what you say on the basis of, well, but it's going to do this, or it's, if we do this and we can sell grazing permits for this, we can privatize this, we can sell this off, which gives us more funding or this. We understand all that because of Utah's landscape and the enormous amount of families that are here. Unlike any other state in the union, this state has more families and larger families per capita than any other state in the United States. So they deal with a completely different front when it comes to budgets and things that they're faced with, both educationally, things that are maybe not doing as well. It is one of the most thriving economies.
You can have like 3 times the children per family. You're going to need a different public school system.
Yes. And so obviously they try to look and find what are those fixes that we can make. Well, obviously one that's proposed in this is, let's transfer the lands. We can better management, and with management under us, we can also decide what parcels and what pieces we can sell or we can monetize for the state. And that we both know, and you and I both understand, is a long road down, just losing a lot. And so in our meeting, we started to bring up things like, this is where you get kind of like, we're not going to sit here and say no land transfer. Obviously, we're going to fight for that. But we also understand, let's talk about the parcels of land that you're discussing out west that are inhibiting growth for communities because they are public land, deemed public land, but yet nobody's using them. They're landlocked, and it's not like they're wetlands where we can't go in there and use them. So we said to him, why then can't we discuss land transactions for these parcels and these pieces of land that help to accomplish goals that you're proposing without taking the whole of it and doing a complete land transfer?
It's like you're going to lose a war.
So that's what I mean.
Lose a battle to win a war.
To win a war. And that's when, my dad taught me that very young. He said, son,
that's the art of negotiation.
You have to pick your battles. If we lose, let's say we lose mind you, I'm only proposing this. Everybody who's listening, these are discussions that are happening. This is nothing that's been final. There's a long road in Utah with Senator Mike Lee and his cabinet and everybody who's a part of this, that he's starting this road down. But we have to start the discussions now, and we have to find those opportunities to negotiate and talk with, hey, we're willing to forego these parcels of public land because they're not really used by hunters, anglers, or anybody. They're just landlocked because they're either private pieces that are landlocked, or you've got pieces and parcels out there that are locking continual growth for the state because I think they were saying 80% of the population is from Ogden to Provo. And so we then start to see, and this is what Land was talking about in that meeting, is he says, we are willing to discuss those. We are deeply concerned about a full land transfer, but let's start from this point and discuss these parcels and these lands that we maybe thousands of acres instead of millions of acres. And that's what I'm getting at with understanding the scope of work that you're up against when you're talking in the political world and what's being proposed. Oftentimes we can and will be able to stop something with the mentality that you just described, and Ramsey's, laid out with that story of saying, teaching a child or bettering a child by saying, you're going to earn your way, the strenuous life mentality against the get whatever you want, whenever you want, and throw a fit until you get it. The result that we're after, though different and comes to a point that you talk about, is dependent upon how we get there and the method by which we use to get there. And so that's where I think it's incredibly important for those who are not informed. And that's something that I think that we're really trying to decide moving into 2019 is, with Operation Conservation, how can we as a company do a better job of being stewards of educating and informing the way you are about the issues, about conservation, about what people can do? Because I think what people don't realize they can do, Brian, is that they can engage and they can get involved. And they can get involved in more ways than just writing a check to these organizations. There's private money that's out there available from companies like ours or others or individuals that want to support organizations, conservation groups, and foundations to help in furthering their missions. But your time is just as valuable as those dollars, and in some ways more. And the whole reason why they wanted us to come to Washington, so it was myself and Harrison, Lindsay from Sitka, is they wanted our brands to come and sit in these meetings and tell these senators or tell these directors how much and how important these initiatives by Wild Sheep Foundation are, because we have multi-use customers. We have customers that operate on public lands, private lands, outfitters, guides, all kinds of different people. We have fishermen, we have motocross, we have snowmobiling. So when we're talking about consumers and we're talking about our brands, the difference between Garrett Long sitting at the table with a foundation and saying, or with a director or a senator and saying, hey, we want to stop this grazing, or we want to allow, we want to separate the domestic and the wild sheep so that they can thrive. They're like, oh my gosh, it's another meeting with another organization that has problems that we need to fix or whatever. When we come and we sit down in that room with them, and I asked them later, because I was like, dude, are we really going to make a difference here? Like, are we helping, or are we just like wasting time in these meetings? And we were with one of their lobbyists, Greg, who works for the Wild Sheep Foundation to lobby for them on Capitol Hill. And as we were there, Greg was like, Jordan, you have no idea how much more impactful these meetings were than we've ever had. We've just met with some of the most high influential people in government that make decisions on resources, land, waters, and wildlife. And you coming to the table as a company or as an organization or an individual makes a significant impact in their decisions to prioritize things. Because what do politicians, what do they operate on? Votes, money. And so when a corporation like Sika or Mountain Ops comes to the table and says, we have all these consumers and we have this base of people who are multi-use that care about these things the way we do, they turn an eye and an ear to saying, okay, so what's the issue and how can we help or what can we do? So that's what, and so Greg later said, he said, no, these meetings were, and he's like, I want you to come back to Capitol Hill. So he's already planning our next meetings. We're going to go back for the third summit of the round table, as well as we're already scheduling meetings to continue and further discussions.
Okay. What is okay, you've talked about some of the positives. What's something you walked away from this event and you're like, okay, that is completely changed how you will move forward? Is there anything that happened where you're like, well, I was thinking maybe this was a route I would take and how I would approach conservation, and now you're like, I'm not going to go down there. Anything new?
Oh, yeah. When I came back to Casey and Trevor and I talked to them about this, because before we started Operation Conservation and before, when I got the invitation from Land Tanya, I said, hey, I'm going to go meet with, Senator Mike Lee. We're getting political as a brand. Do we understand the scope and ramifications that are coupled with that? Meaning you can divide a customer base.
Right.
There are people that'll go, oh, man, I love Mountain Ops for everything they are, but I just can't wrap my head around why they're getting political. And I don't like their views or opinions. Same thing that Gritty experiences when you come out. What I walked away from, what we've talked about here with Casey and Trevor and I, is we have been afforded an opportunity that while we believe and are grateful to live the lives we're living, and we're grateful for the vehicle in which it's provided for us, a great life here with Mountain Ops, being a part of an industry and a community that we love, adore, and are passionate about, and want to protect and want to provide, for us, we're providing a product. We just feel like it's not enough anymore to idly stand by and just rely solely upon the organizations that were founded to protect certain species and certain habitats and wildlife. Because as we're meeting with those partners, they are more concerned, Brian, and want more of a voice and action and boots on the ground and time than they want money. They need the money and they know where to get that, and they're getting it. But they need, so what I walked away from Washington, I walked away with two things. One, the impactful comment from Simon Roosevelt, which was simply,
disagreement does not mean disengagement.
Yes. Does not matter if people agree with me or disagree with me, whether it's individually Jordan Harbertson or it is Mountain Ops. It's no excuse to disengage from the issues or to address them. Secondly, you brought it up earlier. I really walked away with a clear understanding because we talk about the strenuous life. I understand, and so does Casey and Trevor, that there is going to be opposition.
An uphill
battle with us becoming political or getting involved in the politics and trying to navigate those waters. I'm watching now people disagreeing and fighting or not agreeing and belittling or not becoming a unified force and voice for what we share. Instead, we're discussing and arguing about, is health and fitness really relative in the outdoors, or is this person really doing stuff for conservation, or does this person, inches and mass, all these things that can become completely irrelevant to the greater discussions of, guys, if we were to focus more, and this is what I really took away, Brian, in educating and informing and hopefully inspiring more others to become more active in the defending of conservation and understanding the real issues, understanding the process, understanding what's going on. Because what I have come to understand, or what I feel, is that I am a perfect example of someone who just thought or just felt, well, I buy my tag goes to the state, and the state takes those funds and distributes them to, the Utah Department of Wildlife, and then things happen. And while that is very true, that is great. And I can do that every year and I can buy my tag, or I can go to a banquet and I can give money, and those are all good things. But I'm really getting behind the idea that it's not enough. We need to do more. And I think to empower others to do more, they need to become more educated and more informed on everything they can. And so there's a lot of people within our own core group that aren't even on our side, or not even, or we could have a stronger force. Like when you look at the power of numbers, there's so many people who don't even know how to help conservation or to participate in it. But you know what we're not doing? We're not sitting down with our own, the people who actually truly care about the same things we do, and empowering those people to be able to be an army of one.
It doesn't mean that we can't agree, but I do agree that inside our community, there's a lot of division, and I would like to see that go away. Someone wrote in the other day, I'm out, I'm doing my thing, I'm hunting, and they wrote in and they said, well, I don't like what so-and-so just posted, and don't you worry about the message it sends to the non-hunter. And I've talked about that a lot. Of course, I care a lot about what the non-hunter thinks. I feel like we have an opportunity to change the way people perceive hunting, the way they see it, or at least educate them on what it really is to you and to I. And I think what I see, though, is this person writes in and says, well, aren't you really worried? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's always a concern. But I'm far, far more concerned about how how individuals within this community cannibalize each other. I'm more concerned about how we destroy each other than I am concerned about the anti-hunter.
And I want to make it very clear, so I don't ruffle any feathers, that my belief or my opinion on this is a matter of prioritization. It's a matter of what you're describing, which is, I think it is fantastic, and I'm glad to see that at the same table, this non-endemic audience or core group hunting group is meeting with a hunting group, and I think that's awesome, and continue to pursue that at the respectable levels that it deserves and merits. But don't
do it at the expense.
And do not forget or unprioritize or deprioritize and disengage from empowering our own to understand how to protect the things that we love and what they can do to help that process, or what they can do to get involved. And that is where I see a great void and need. Is I feel like over the last, if you think about it, Brian, last maybe 50 years, with what conservation groups have done to create opportunities to raise money and to protect the land and resources and animals that we love. And now we're seeing record numbers in a lot of these big game animals because of the proper management and legislation that's put in place and organizations that have fought for that. And I see that, there's this kind of dying off where they're talking about not as many people are, hunters' numbers are declining. And I'm like, well, guys are getting old and they're literally dying, or they're too old and they can't buy tags anymore. So the amount of tags that we're seeing is not as much as it was. Or the data is wrong. Or the data is wrong. There's so many things. What I do see is a community, and what I think, and I think you believe as well, is we have the resources and we have the tools to be able to deploy, to be able to help in the fight or in the pursuit of the preservation of public lands, waters, and wildlife. And we have that right here within, even if the numbers by whatever metrics you're going off of are declining over here based on age and people just either literally dying or leaving the sport because they're not active in it anymore. You have an incredibly, I would say more than any time in history, an incredibly active community of hunters and anglers, because of the tools and resources we have at our to deploy. And that is where I agree with you 100% on the fact that prioritize your time, prioritize, your efforts to help educate and inspire and inform everyone that is on our team already. If we can empower them and we can help focus on efforts to help them understand these things, because they're very complex in a lot of ways and can be very boring in many ways, and people can just disengage. If we can involve more to engage in the issues or engage in the things that we're up against, I feel like we can really truly make a difference. And we can do what you said, which is stand for something so that we don't lose everything. And fight for what we believe and stand for those things and take on the opposition as it comes, but never and truly live a strenuous life.
Right. Because conservation is uncomfortable.
It's so uncomfortable for people.
So would you say you're more optimistic than discouraged by
so optimistic.
the engagement?
I'm incredibly optimistic because
a lot of people will get engaged and they're just like, they'll write into me and they'll say, you know, man, I see these big cities and I see all these people who don't get our life and who vote against hunting grizzly bear, let's say, in BC. And it's like, man, I just don't know if we can communicate our message and salvage the future.
Great example. This is the history. There's an organization locally here called Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife. It was actually started by a guy named Don Pay. Not a favorable person in people's view simply because he is involved in politics. Don Pay was able to rally sportsmen back in the 90s to change the Constitution of Utah, that anything that has to do with or involve wildlife and natural resources has to go to a 2/3 vote. That everyone said could never be done. And when that happened, do you know what that did? That alienated and eliminated all of the anti-groups that were fighting to try and literally get rid of fishing and hunting here in Utah. Because not too long ago, it was in peril. Numbers of mule deer were like I remember he was telling us about how deer herds and even elk herds were at 15,000. And guess how many tags they gave out that year? 70,000 tags, right? For spike, like for bull. And just how unmanaged and like groups and even the director at the time was an environmentalist that really didn't care about the animals, found out later, but was eventually ousted. And everyone said it couldn't be done and you can't do this. And, you know, this is the way it is. And so that's the thing, like even in the 90s, that people still were living in peril or were like, this can't happen. And it did. Because people did what you said, Brian. They stood up for something. They stood against the opposition and they found a way to make it work. And they found a way to change literally an article of Constitution within the state of Utah that allowed better upside for sportsmen and hunters and anglers against simply just the ranchers and grazers that were really dominating the political space then. So I believe truly that I'm more optimistic. Mm-hmm. And I believe my optimism comes from a belief that like what you're doing, Randy Newberg, and other great voices that are speaking out and getting uncomfortable about these kind of things are also helping to inspire others to do the same. I think you and I talked about this the other day when the Mike Lee situation came up. If we remember, I think it was a little bit over a year ago when the Chaffetz situation happened, mm-hmm. and how many people were at odds with each other because they didn't really understand the whole like transfer of public lands and small government and, you know, right, left, and don't we want a small government? That's kind of like what, you know, me as a Republican wants. And now you see guys on the same page. Oh my gosh, yeah. And it's also an issue where liberal and conservative actually coexist because they, like you said, they care about the same thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe they care about it differently, but at the end of the day, they care about keeping access to that.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden you can get people who are on the other side of the table together on an issue that does protect not only the land, the resources, and it protects the wildlife and habitats. So I am optimistic, Brian. I think that there's incredible amount of resources that you talk about that when people know what those resources are or how they can get them or learn about them, then they can deploy them, and everybody has a page or can have a voice, and everybody can vote.
Yeah.
And everybody can speak up. And I think to your point earlier, the reason why people might feel like they're outnumbered is because they don't realize that there is, like, we are actually a large, large number of people that have an incredible amount of influence when it does come to politics. If the latest election is any representation of that, we still exist, and there is still good that can be done and things that can happen, because if we become engaged and we stand for something and we stand up and we are active instead of reactive. We're more proactive.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. I don't know.
I'm optimistic by nature. I'm also pragmatic as well.
Oh, totally.
Like, I'm not going to go down like
you're a silver lining guy just like me.
Yeah. Well, and I look at it this way. What are you going to do? Quit? Like, grow some, cojones. Like, there's a job to do. Yeah, it's an uphill battle. Even if there is slim to zero chance that what I do will have a long-term effect,
I still got to try.
I got to try. And that's just the way I am.
Yep.
It's like, I'm not about giving up or quitting. So, but I am far more optimistic. I come from a liberal place. Portland, Oregon is.
Yeah, you guys are weird over there.
We're weird, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally you're the mantra over there.
And I have been around and spent a lot of time with people, with a very progressive and liberal mindset, and those individuals love what I do. They love hunting. They actually love hunting the way I do it. And they want me to bring the meat into the office. And although they don't agree with bear hunting, they still want to have a pepperoni steak, right? It's like, what? So you get to, I have just seen that it's mostly education. There's a lot of knee-jerk reaction from those that don't kind of understand us. Like I said, the part that kind of discourages me more is our own community attacking itself.
Yeah.
Hating on this person,
imploding
hating on that company, hating on this, or when two conservation organizations are arguing or fighting or being exclusionary, or when two companies go head to head and try to trash the other one. Like, we don't need that. That doesn't belong here. When you see how the NRA and Yeti interacted earlier this year, we don't need that.
No.
That is not. We're more or less, we believe in the same thing, and we're kind of that same community. We love hunting, we love guns, we love Second Amendment, we love hunting. Why are we
getting in the weeds on all these other
going
stuff?
After each other when we have so much opposition on the outside from anti-hunting groups, anti-gun groups? It's like, that's stupid. We just attacked each other in our own community. And I would say it was the NRA attacked Yeti.
Yeah, NRA attacked because of insufficient information, and also going off of something that was so small without getting into details that if they would have just taken a second, let some other eyes look at it and understand, they would have gone, oh, they're simply doing this. And so, okay, we're just making a small little change here. And instead of all hell broke loose and everything.
Yeah. And to see it all kind of devolve, it's a shame. I want both organizations, because I consider them within our group, to support each other. So that cannibalism from within is the one thing, and that goes from individual to individual as well.
Oh, yeah.
I'm spending a lot more time being less involved in the gossip or what so and so did or who did, and I just don't have time for it, and I don't want it in my life. And I want to share the positive message. Yeah. I want to promote the positive aspects of hunting, and those who are promoting that same message, I want to help them along. And
to me, that's what I hope people get from this podcast, is that it's not doom and gloom.
Yeah.
That there's so much upside for all of us, and that conservation is something that I hope everyone can take a moment to really try and understand.
Yeah.
I think that's the part, because when you hear the word conservation, people have different things, even within our own community, of what that means.
Right.
But when you truly on the full gamut of conservation, the way you're reading history books, you're learning about laws that have been passed that affected, we're talking recently about the Land, Water, and Conservation Fund that's up. Like, all these things that I never knew about, truly, that I am starting to understand, I'm learning, is helping me to understand the scope of work that needs to be done to help protect and to help fight for and to stand for. And one thing that I wanted to share was from his strenuous talk that I think goes right in line with what you just said, is, above all, let us shrink from no strife, moral or physical, within or without the nation, provided we are certain that the strife is justified, for it is only through strife, through hard and dangerous endeavor, that we shall ultimately win the goal of true national greatness. And so at the end of the day, and his speech, many can interpret that many ways they want, but in the strenuous life that Theodore Roosevelt talks about, and as he describes in one part and one excerpt from his speech, which I admonish everyone to go read. You should, because it'll just make you feel like, wow, I need to go do some hard things, and I need to be able to survive or endure those hard things, and that great things will come. And that's what he's talking about, is no matter the strife, the physical, mental, whether we're against opposition, a nation, or anything, the only way through it is through hard and dangerous endeavor.
Right.
That's it. So take from this what you guys will, but just know that you can make a difference. You have a voice. You have a vote. You have so many things that you, as this amazing, incredible country that we live in, God bless America for the freedoms that we enjoy and for the ability to be a people that is, puts people in place because of we the people put them there, not because they were put there or that they were a dictator or anything. We have an opportunity, just as the same note, to be able to make change within our own community. And I hope that we'll look inward, not only in ourselves, but within our community, and find ways to better it, to be better representatives of it, and also to be a positive impact of change and positivity. And like you said, cut out the fat that's lying there that is negativity and, enviness, covetousness, or gossip. Just you want to lose some weight in your life that you feel like is hanging onto you and it's like all negative. Cut out the fat, man. Just cut that fat off. You've got a nice prime little steak there. You can cook it up. It's delicious. That would be my, I don't know, maybe my closing remarks or my invitation to all of us is to what you've said, which I think you said it a lot better than I did, but there's a lot that we can do, and there's a lot to do. So let's just go do it, and let's endeavor together, and let's go through the hardships, and let's let us not shrink from no strife. Yeah, as Theodore said,
the strenuous life,
or as Jocko Willingham said,
Willing.
I always says Willingham, don't I? Or like Willing. It's Jocko Willing.
Willick. W-L.
Sorry, Jocko.
W-I-L-L-I-N-K.
He's going to beat the crap out of me if he ever sees me.
It's funny
He's
when
like,
I hear
I've heard you on podcasts.
When you say Willingham. I'm like, where do you come up with that?
I don't know when it happened.
Just say Jocko.
Yeah.
There's
and I
only
did
one.
Say, Jocko. There's no other Jocko I know of. But Jocko would say something like, wait, what was that video we were watching of him that you and I were dying over? When he
when he's on Instagram, or he says something about how people don't care.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't. Oh.
No. You know what I'm saying now?
Yeah.
What is it that he said?
He's like, everything's combined against you, and everything sucks, and everything's hard, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and nobody cares.
And nobody, and he's like,
something like,
when everything's against you, and nothing's working, and all you can do is squander. Nobody cares. And you're just like, I love this guy. Like his just absolute no nonsense, bare bone basic approach to extreme ownership and just marching forward into battle and
get over it.
Yeah. Just like to your point, are you a crying little baby because you want, I don't care. So what? Cry all you want. I'm not going to give you
the
what
candy
you want.
bar.
I'm not going to give you the candy bar.
So embrace the strenuous life. Folks, thanks for listening to the Gritty Podcast, and I appreciate it. I do. Appreciate everyone's involvement in the show. And as always, leave a comment in the YouTube if you're watching it there. Leave a comment on social media.
Go check out Brian's YouTube page. A lot of great gritty films.
I did put a lot of films out.
We had that. You did the
open season.
Guys, if you want to learn more about mountain ops, you're welcome to go to our website. I know we've been on this podcast a lot, but if you don't know, mountainops.com. That's MTNOPS.com.
Yep.
We've got some really cool things next month. I'm just going to do a little quick plug here. So here's my mountain ops plug. I did really good.
Do it.
Did really good. The whole, when is this podcast coming out? When are we going to do it?
Whatever. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Next day.
Okay. So for the rest of the month, there's this thing called Upstober that you can get involved in, and you can just go to our website to find out what that is, which is every day we're giving away some cool prizes as a give back to our customers. This is our 4th annual Upstober. We've done it every year since our inception. But next month, we got something really cool coming that I hope everybody will tune into. First and foremost, we have something we talked about, Operation Conservation today, which is something really cool that we're extremely passionate about here. But we also have Operation Conquer Hunger, which next month, all month long, what Trevor's established is every order from Mountain Ops, we usually donate 1 nutritional meal to those in need who can't even supplement, don't even have food.
Yep.
Next month, we will be upping the ante and we will be donating 10 meals per order in a shared goal to reach 1 million meals donated to help conquer hunger. That's our goal for this year. So we're really excited for the opportunity to hopefully reach that goal and impact a lot of lives and help a lot of people out. And then also what's coming along with that that's fun is we're going to be doing, we've done this before and we're going to do it again, which is we're going to give away a truck. So somebody's going to get the opportunity to win this really cool Chevy truck that we've tricked out. Redone the interior. We've got some really cool accessories on it, bumpers and headlights and nice wheels, tires, a great truck that anybody could take in the backcountry and hunt with or go fishing with, whatever you want. That's going to be for anybody during the month of November that places an order. They get entered to win. And then we're going to have these 3 mystery flavors that are A, B, C, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie.
One of them's root beer, right?
What? You don't know. You don't know what it is. There's 3 mystery flavors. They're Ignite. You purchase any one of those, and if you can properly guess what the flavor is, and you put that in.
I'm going to say root beer. I didn't even know anything about this.
Yeah, let's just say you say it's root beer. If you're correct, it will exponentially.
That's been missing from the line.
Oh, I love root beer.
I do too.
I love beer from the root. I'm not much of a straight beer drinker.
But I love root beer.
I like root beer. That gives you an exponential increased opportunity to win the truck. So it's going to be something fun. Anyway, sorry guys. I know you're like, oh, sponsored and we don't want to keep this so natural, but I'd be remiss if I didn't tell everybody who is a fan of Mountain Ops or anybody who's on the fringe that there's a great opportunity to give back next month, which is in meals, and also every order goes towards conservation, and an opportunity to win a truck, which who doesn't want that? Go buy a t-shirt, dude. Yeah. Go buy an Ignite.
Love it. That you guys have some cool new shirts, the public land ones.
The all access pass to public lands.
I landed in the Yukon and I got off the plane, and John Barklow's not a man of many words.
I love that, man.
And I got off the plane, I walk up and we're hanging out, and he turns to me, looks at my shirt, and he goes, I really like that shirt. I'm like, thanks, John. He's like, no, seriously, they did a really good job on that shirt. That's a great shirt. And I'm like, is this the first time no, I've been watching. I've seen the shirt. I like that shirt. I'm like, all right, cool.
Dude, I love John Barklow.
And then we just loaded up and left. I don't know what to say exactly. Yeah. It's very to the point. Because if he hates your shirt, he'll tell you.
But if he does, he's going to tell you too.
Right.
And that's the thing. And if he's going to make a post on Instagram about how cats are some of the most amazing animals to tailor your hunting tactics after, he's going to do it.
Yes.
And he's not ashamed. He's unapologetic and he's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love John Barklow. But yes,
they're cool shirts, and I think and it goes along with the subject of this podcast, Yeah. It supports conservation, and it's a great.
Everybody should know if they don't already. I think we made it clear on our podcast with Jared Fraser, 2% for conservation. Mm-hmm. Every purchase at Mountain Ops is going towards Operation Conservation that helps with funding these organizations or helping to
you put it as
fund
a priority.
Projects. Yeah. So it's like, and what I'm excited to real quick about is next year I'm trying to plan to where we can do a better job at being transparent where those dollars go. So anybody could jump on the website, see how much money has been donated to conservation efforts, and they can actually go into a detailed list of where certain funds went to either fund, maybe it was a project for Mule Deer Foundation for wintering grounds, or maybe it was a project for RMEF. Maybe it was just money donated straight up so that they could do something with, and they'll report to us what they used it for. But our hope is to help show people that transparently, we're not an organization or a company that it just says
Hey, we're doing this.
We want you to see what your dollars and your support is going towards supporting on the conservation side.
Yeah.
So something that we're working on too. Lots of things we're working on.
Yeah. Very cool.
Also, you guys can come by the Mountain Ops headquarters anytime you want and come hang out with Brian Call and the Gritty Podcast. And you can come work out at the gym, go sign autographs,
which I've enjoyed.
Babies.
There's been quite a few people drop in every week, pretty much.
I love it. I don't think people really know that they're allowed to come here.
Yeah. No,
Like-
it is maybe a little.
We haven't done anything like an open house or a party to kind of announce it yet because we're still working on some things in the building.
It is an open door, though.
It's an open door.
Yeah.
We've got a retail downstairs. You can come buy some Mountain Ops. You're always welcome to come drop in if we're available. You know, we don't mess around all day. We actually get work done. You're welcome to stop by and see if we're available. We'd love to chat with you, talk with you, meet you.
Come to the gym.
Come to the gym. We usually are there every morning, about 7 to 8 or 9. But it's open to all.
Yep. All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Gritty Podcast. We're going to wrap this baby up.
This is Jocko. Stay gritty.
And as always, stay gritty. Despite our ever-changing, ever-indignant world with its growing ignorance of and indifference to the ways of the wild, I remain a predator, pitying those who revel in artificiality and synthetic success while regarding me and my kind as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood. I stalk a real world of dark wood and tall grass stirred by a restless wind blowing across sunlit water and beneath star-strewn sky. And on those occasions when I choose to kill, to claim some small part of nature's bounty for my own, I do so by choice, quickly, with the learned efficiency of a skilled hunter. Further, in my heart and mind, I know the truth and make no apologies for my actions or my place in time. Others around me may opt to eat only plants, nuts, and fruits. Still others may employ faceless strangers to procure their meats, their leather, their feathers, and all those niceties and necessities of life. Such is their right, of course, and I wish them well. All I ask in return is no one begrudge me, and all of us who may answer the primordial stirrings within our hunter souls, my right to do some of these things myself. What you just heard is a quote from M.R. James. We truly live in a world that is largely ignorant and indifferent to the ways of the wild. And although some regard us as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood, we have the opportunity to change the way these people view the hunter and the hunt. We can share our experiences and nature's bounty with those who employ these faceless strangers. And by so doing, we make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the wild animals in the wild places we care so deeply about. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting and the outdoors. Our wild animals and our wild places depend on it.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
Gritty Bowman.